In the last couple of days, I've actually had a chance to better understand what is exactly going on, and seeing that the culprits behind these crimes of the Shias in Pakistan are actually members of the Taliban. And what is sad is that many people don't understand this and don't know this information. And so the world needs to know that we are all victims of the Taliban. Whether we are Muslim, whether we are women, whether we are children, anyone who is seeking to do something that is beyond the boundaries of what the Taliban define as their Islam is a target. And it's so critical that we shine a light. And we shined a light when the situation of Malala took place and the whole world was outraged. We need that outrage to continue happening day after day when Pakistani Shias are being targeted in their communities and in their homes by the Taliban.
Brothers and sisters, it's very sad that we see in the world when they kill an animal in one place, people speak about it. We are here, brothers and sisters, when Taliban wanted to destroy the statues of the Buddhists. Everybody talk, even including the United Nations. We stop against them, we speak against them. Why don't they speak against those people who are killing the Shias? Why don't they talk about it, brothers and sisters? Is that those people who are getting killed, their blood is cheap, and other people, their blood is more expensive? We want to tell the entire world that we are here for all humanity. If today another person, Christian, get killed any place, we are all against the killers and we side by the killed one.
But it's all too easy, I think, to single out the Taliban, whether this is the Pakistani Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, and so on, as being either the only or the key source of the chaos that is now engulfing the region. And I think that to have a full understanding of who the Taliban are is important in terms of who we turn to in order to counter their sectarianism, their misogyny, and so on. So let me say this briefly. The Taliban didn't appear out of nowhere. These are the refugees, the children of refugees produced by the Soviet-Afghan War of the 1980s, who then get trained in Pakistan in this very ultra-conservative orthodox interpretation of Islam, but who are used by the Pakistani ISI, the Pakistani military, to extend Pakistani influence over Afghanistan. Because stability in Afghanistan was central to Pakistan's ambition at that time in terms of building pipelines to access Caspian Sea oil and gas reserves through Afghanistan and to Pakistan. So these are some of the forces in the region. But if we step back a little bit more, you look at the proxy war that was waged by the Mujahideen, the Afghan holy warriors, at the behest of the United States. The way in which Brzezinski would put it, Carter's Secretary of Defense, the way that he put it is that funding for the Mujahideen began even before the Soviet invasion, because the US was setting up what it hoped would be the Soviet Union's Vietnam. That is, a defeat that would then lead to the Soviet Union's breakup.
And that's when the Pakistani president at the time, General Zia-ul-Haq, founded the extremist groups in Pakistan, the likes of Sipai Sahaba. And he is the founder of the jihadi movements. He was also supported by the Americans at the time because of the Russian war, Afghanistan and Russia war. So all the ammunitions and all the training was going to Afghanistan through Pakistan. So they were training the Afghani Mujahideen, which later on were named Taliban. So Afghan Mujahideen basically were trained by Pakistan and America to fight against Russia, and they were praised for their fight against Russia because it was against Russia. But when the same people turned around against America, they were named Taliban, extremists and terrorists. So they were always terrorists and they were always extremists from the beginning, we never supported them.
And the US, with its allies in the region, particularly Israel, but also Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and so on, funneled billions of dollars to training these people, knowing full well who they are. Nevertheless, they recruit them, and then we see 10 years of fighting, of destruction. And what happens after that? Does the US have a Marshall Plan to help reconstruct Afghanistan? No, sadly no. If anything, the 7 Mujahideen factions who fought at the behest of the United States would then start to fight one another in a civil war. They would shell all of the major cities, create even more destruction, start the attacks on women's rights, which then the Taliban would only increase and accelerate and so forth.
You know, in this century, in 20th century, we've seen many enemies of the Shias. Mainly Ali Saud, who destroyed the Shia areas, the Shia people in Saudi Arabia. And they changed the name from Hijaz to Saudi Arabia. And they moved the Shias from the shrine of the Holy Prophet from close by to the vicinity to an outside place in Medina. And they destroyed the shrines of the Marium Soomro in Jannat al-Baqi. So these are Ali Saud, who were the founders of the hatred against Shias. They had many followers around the region, but one of the biggest enemies of the Shias was Saddam, who wanted to kill all the Shias in Iraq. There were 85% Shias in Iraq when Saddam came into power, and when he left, there were only 65% Shias. Many fled the country, and he killed somewhere around 2.7 million people in Iraq and in the Iran-Iraq war. That's the amount of Shias that he killed.
Saudi Arabia has actually played a very decisive role in shaping politics in the Middle East and in Central and South Asia in all sorts of ways. And their role in Pakistan is, rarely talked about to any depth. So I'll just say a few things about it, and that is that starting with the Eisenhower Doctrine of 1957, there is the effort by the elite, the political elite in the United States, to actually try to pose Islamism as a counter-force to secular nationalism. That is to say, if you look at the strength that the ideas of people like Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt had, as well as secular nationalists like Mossadegh of Iran and so on. These were the dominant ideas of that time. And when the US found that they couldn't bring these forces under their influence, they started cultivating Islamists who could serve as a counter. Saudi Arabia is very central to this policy of the United States. In fact, the way that some people put it is they wanted to create an Islamic pope in the form of the Saudi leader who would vie for power and dominance in the region against the likes of Gamal Abdel Nasser. And so Saudi Arabia, with all of its petrodollars, would then begin a process of introducing Islam into politics in a very systematic way. They would do this in the forms of setting up religious schools. They would print and distribute Qurans, and particularly their brand of Wahhabi Islam. They would use their money to recruit people. They would bring migrant workers in and then send them out to other countries and so forth. And, a lot of this I talk about in my book. But suffice it to say that their influence in Pakistan is precisely in this manner, particularly in the 1980s. They would go along with the plan, but that instituted by the dictator that was ruling the country at that time, to Islamize that society, and they would provide not just money but ideology as well, and all, of course, with the US's blessings.
With seeing all of these enemies of the Shias around the world, majority of the Shias get along very nicely with majority of the Muslims who are Sunni Muslims, or even Deobandis, or even normal, Salafis who do not believe in extremism, who just have beliefs that certain things are haram and forbidden and bid'ats, but they do not believe in killing the other Muslims. Now, there are many extremists in Islam who believe that we should first kill all the Shias and then slowly we will kill all the other Sunnis as well. And then we will basically take over. So these extremist groups have had backing of many Western powers and many Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, and the previous Libyan president, Muammar Gaddafi. So these people actually sponsored many of the extremist groups in many parts of the world to carry out jihadi activities. In the name of jihad, they were being, they were terrorizing people.
In 2002, when Secretary General Kofi Annan was present, he issued a resolution which urged all world leaders to follow in the footsteps of Imam Ali, and he also stated that there was no just leader in the history of humankind as Imam Ali after the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him. So we have the United Nations here on one hand, which is urging all of its world leaders to follow in the footsteps of the just governance of Imam Ali, and then on the other hand we have the United Nations, which fails to protect the very Shias who are the true followers of Imam Ali in every aspect of their life and everything, not in just governance, not in just leadership.